Torej, dragi obiskovalci tukaj v Kinu Šiška, lepo pozdravljeni. Čas je za naš drugi masterclass pod pokroviteljstvom Outfit 7, ki se mu zato seveda toplo zahvaljujemo. Z nami bo trenutno Aisha Franz, mednarodno priznana berlinska striparka in ilustratorka, ki nam bo predstavila svoj način dela. Mogoče jo poznate že po njenih albumih stripovskih, ki jih je začela objavljati vse tja od že leta 2011. Takrat smo lahko brali njen Earthling, potem leto kasneje Brigitte, leta 2016 album z naslovom Shit is Real in pa lani je izdala še fiktivne stripovske spomine Where is Aisha, ki so izšli pri berlinski risozaložbi Kolorama, ki jo bomo popoldne tudi malce natančneje predstavili. Predstavitev bo potekala v angleščini in zdaj je čas, da Aisho tudi lepo pozdravimo. Aisha, hello, it's good to have you here with us today at festival Tinta. We are glad that at least we can have you on Zoom if we can have you here in person. So I'm actually suggesting that you start with your presentation. I believe you have much to tell us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me and also for introducing me. I think you already, what I could hear or understand, you already mentioned the most important things. So I am a comic artist. I also work as an illustrator, mostly editorial illustrations, and all the books that you can see here were already mentioned in the introduction. So this is just a selection of my works, or mostly like graphic novels that I have published so far, to give you a little bit of context and overview. And today I want to mostly talk about how I go about making comics, or how like my typically a graphic novel comes to be. I want to say this is like really my personal approach. I would say I'm definitely not the most effective. It is not the most effective way, and probably not the way that works for everyone. So I would not say that, wow, you have to do it exactly like I do it, because this is the way, so please. Probably the opposite. Maybe this should be an example for you all, how to not do it. But I hope that some of you can take away some tips or insights. And so I wanted initially to do in the presentation much more about, or take little bits of presentations I have done in the past. But just like how I do my comics, I always have to start completely from zero and make something new. So this is a brand new presentation. And I'm currently working on my next graphic novel, Work-Life Balance, which is going to be released in spring of next year. And I thought this could be a nice way to give you the insight on how, from the very beginning, on working on a book to the last finishes, of how it works for me and how I go about it. So this is according how I approached this book. So yeah, let's get started. Maybe to give you a little bit of context, first of all, about this book I'm working on. So the title is Work-Life Balance, and it is centered around 3 different characters. So it's actually also 3 different stories, and a 4th character, which is in all the stories, which is this person, this character. It's a therapist, a psychotherapist, a very unusual one. And I have these characters. This one is called Anita. She's like a frustrated artist who makes pottery and struggles with her not fulfilled dream of becoming a real, so-called real artist, who has shows in galleries and stuff. And the other character is Sandra, who works in a startup and makes YouTube videos, has like a YouTube channel of like lifestyle videos, like morning routines and stuff. And she also sexually harasses her co-worker at the startup. And it's a lot about her struggling to deal with being unloved. And the third character is Rex, who is a programmer who gets really fucked over by this startup, the same startup that Sandra works in, and decides to works for food delivery, like bike delivery thing, and can't find a proper job within his profession until he collects so much rage that he will actually take revenge. This is a little kind of intro. So yeah, getting started. How do I get started? Well, you know, like at first there's always this idea of making a new book, but this doesn't usually work for me. So I think a lot of artists have work in different ways. So there's people who maybe have like an idea of a topic, or have like want to do a comic about a certain thing, let's say maybe an event in history or something. So this is totally a different approach. For me, it's more that anything can lead into a story. So I never have like a specific idea or starting point. So this is more like a kind of by coincidence, right? Like you run into something in your sketchbook, or you have like a character that just sticks around and you make it work. It's more like a roulette almost, like what's next? Okay. And then you like skip through some pages in your sketchbook and stick with one thing, and this is the thing you're gonna make your next book on. A little bit, like it's not that simple, but this is basically how it works for me. Anything can lead into a story. It's really not, it's much more about like taking a certain, it can be a location, it can be a character, it can be a certain mood, and you feel like something connects to you and you just make it work. And for me, a lot of times it works like, you know, when I just walk around the city in my daily life, I sometimes imagine that I'm a character in a movie. You know, like these opening scenes in a movie, there is like a music playing and you're walking around and you imagine you are the like kind of opening scene of a movie, and it's a fictional movie. You don't know, yeah, it's like just this little caption, and this is actually exactly how I find my way into a story. So I would have maybe a character that pops up somewhere. No, I'm a little too far. That pops up somewhere, and I kind of put the character into a fictional setting, or I draw a scene. Like you can see here, there is this character just like standing in her bathroom, and it's like it could be a fictional opening of a fictional movie, or in this case a fictional graphic novel. Like I don't really know yet what it will be about, but I have to start somewhere. And so I kind of dream my way in. And so I take a character, and you basically just like let it come alive. Like maybe I just start a sequence and see where it takes me. It doesn't have to be planned. I just get started and see where it takes me. So this is how it worked for me with work-life balance as well. So this is actually, I'm showing you right now, one of the very first sequences I did with my character Anita in, and it's totally not one that's going to be in the book in the end. It took me somewhere completely different. This was just the starting point where I was like getting to know, or like just getting started with starting something new. I didn't even know I was going to make a book yet. I was just starting something new, and I had this character. And this is just a view from inside a cafe to the street. And it's basically just Anita observing the street, and then it would continue with her own story, which I never continued because, as I said, this is totally not in the book or anything, but it was certainly a starting point. And she just came alive through just like a random short sequence that I got started with. And usually that's pretty much how I would do all of my comics, even short comics. Like sometimes when you're waiting for the big idea, but sometimes it will not hit you. So you just start with a random image and on a blank piece of paper with a grid on it, and just make it work and see where it takes you. Something will happen for sure. Maybe it will not click in the end and you put it away or you throw it away. Maybe it will click and it will grow into something bigger. So always just get started with the first panel and it will go somewhere. And yeah, you can always worry later, right? Like, as I said, like I edited so much out of these initial attempts in the final book. So just get started, and later you can decide if it works or not. For me, also it's very helpful to think and start small. This goes in two ways. But the first one is that I actually never start thinking about a bit, like I'm going to work on my next 300-page graphic novel or anything like that. So I actually just want to work on something. And so work-life balance, as many of my previous books have actually started as like short zines, mini comics. These ones, for example, I published with Colorama, and it was just like a loose little project that kind of grew into this book, but none of these is actually in the book. But it's like also, you know, I just got started somewhere and then continued making these like small, I mean, each one has like 20 pages or something. You can see some of them actually in the exhibition, Colorama exhibition. Same with my book, Brigitte, or in German, Brigitte, sounds less sexy. It was also first just like a series of zines that I made going to comics festivals and just wanted to have something. And when I finished the first zine, I noticed the story is not finished yet, so I continued, and it was 4 zines in the end, and then it was published. In the end, it was published as a book. So I could never think, I mean, it's really hard to just start with like approaching, and I think that's something, an advice that I would give students I used to work with too, like never think you want to make like a big book. Just start something, eventually it will grow, eventually it will stay small, but it's a lot of pressure to bear when you look up a really high mountain that you really still have to climb on. So it's always good to do little bits. Whereas Aisha, which was my last book that I published last year with Colorama, also started as an online Instagram comic. I was kind of, you know, trying to do something on the side between other projects, and just like loosely making small sequences, publishing them on Instagram. And eventually it grew into this story that had a beginning and an end and a middle, and it kind of became a proper book. So this is always helpful to like really start small and step by step, and maybe make little things first and then let them grow. Think around the corner. It's like a kind of literal translation of a German saying that kind of refers more towards like the first idea or the first inclination might not always be the best one, or it's hardly ever the best. I would say that our brains are generally stuck with stereotypes of thinking and like a very mainstream way of thinking, because this is just how we exist in the world and what we're exposed to a lot of times. And we also want to, like our brains want to kind of stick to certain norms. So this goes also with like working on ideas on stories. I think that I always have to, maybe I have a first idea, but I have to write it down and maybe then think about how can I make it different, or how can I make it weird or less obvious, right? Like I think it's always good to take another step and another step to go away from what's expected and more into like the unknown. And also I think it's also very helpful to just always kind of feed your brain with these are just some examples from movies that are out of the norm, or kind of break certain rules. And, like certain avant-garde films or nouvelle vague, or even in literature and music, it's always good to feed your brain with like things that are totally different. And I think that can give you, it balances this like need to be normative and maybe kind of take a step into the extreme. The next thing that how I work, and what I meant in the beginning with being not very effective, is gathering a lot of material. As I already showed you, this first scene that I wrote years ago from this cafe scene, never made it into a book, actually goes for a lot of material that I create. So I don't work in a way that I make a complete storyboard, and then I do the inking. I do little bits of storyboard, or step by step I work on a scene, then on the next, and it grows very simultaneously. I never have like a finished concept. And so that means that I gather a lot of material and ink a lot of pages that in the end will never make it into the final object. Actually more, so the work-life balance now has like something about like 270 pages. And I would think that there is another 270 pages that didn't make it, or maybe even more. So there is a lot of stuff that gets edited out in the end. And for me, this is not like lost work. It's part of the process. So this way I think, right? Like I have to bring it onto paper and draw it to see if it works or not. And also I'm not afraid of tossing it out in the end, because it was a necessary step to take. So I wouldn't cry after it, right? It's just part of it. But this is just an example of a lot of material and notes and directions I took that later on, maybe I turned around 180 degrees. And the book actually now, or the story, is not at all how I imagined it in the beginning, which is a good thing, I think. yeah, this editing process, I mean, here you can see the classic image of, I think that's from Homeland, trying to like, you know, make the connections as a investigator in the CIA. Basically, this is how it feels when I'm editing my work. I usually work with, for work-life balance, I worked with an editor. So I would hand her my material and we would go through it together and think about what works and what doesn't and connect the dots. But previously I would also send it to other people. So it's always, I think, very important to gather the material and hand it off to other people to get a second and third and fourth opinion on it. So yeah, this is like what in the end, the distillation of a long process. Also, for me, it's like an on and off process working on a project like this. So it's been a few years and I work on it a little bit, then I do other stuff and then I come back to it and then I do other stuff again. So it's like really something that happens almost like on the side or whenever I have the time. And of course, during these breaks and when I come back to it, I would look at it from a different angle, and that also changes the course. Practicalities. So what are the practical things that help me work on this? First, maybe like the character development. How do I go about it? I already told you a little bit how I just get started with the white page and a grid to like kind of make characters come alive, and how I imagine them being in a fictional story or in some setting. So I usually do this a lot. Like here, I kind of put them into, I make a lot of drawings that are not comics, just illustrations of like them being in their natural habitat and going about their lives. And just kind of during this drawing process, when I just make an illustration with the characters in them, I kind of, you know, grow closer to them too. So I make a lot of these just like kind of imagined scenes and drawings. I also, how you can see on the right, take a lot of notes, and I make some sort of character sheets, just like studying them and equipping them maybe with certain traits. Sometimes they're terrible traits, you know, you don't want them to be just nice. Sometimes my characters are usually pretty awful. And so it's like kind of step by step writing down what their motivations are, what their dreams are, how they're developing, what is their biggest conflict, and like how are they emotionally, right? So you want to usually know a lot about them, even though you don't actually, the story won't be about a specific trait of them, but you want to know the trait about them because it's gonna make them believable, right, as a character. And of course, a lot of sketches. It helps to just like kind of draw them over and over again in different situations, in clothes, naked, everything, you know, in different situations in life, just to kind of experiment. And those sketches will also give you new ideas for the story itself. The other thing I find very important is to let them grow by themselves. So it's almost like raising a child. You first you need to really kind of watch over them and equip them with tools for life and really help them with a lot of things. But at some point, you kind of have to cut the string and let them grow and develop. Because that happens with characters in a book. I would say at some point while working on a story, they will start making their own decisions, and they will start telling their own stories, and you're more of an observer I feel like more of an observer, actually writing it down and drawing it, because they're already like full of everything you gave them in the beginning, and you have to also be able to let go. I feel like that's a very important step, at least for me, to let them go and do their own thing to a certain degree. Because it also, I think it's important that you as an author also can get surprised by them. Like you are surprised by what they do. And this is actually the most fun part I find about making comics and writing. Another practical thing is like the small bites. So you already had like think small in terms of not think of the big book and make small editions. But for me, it's also really important to not take it on as a whole thing in format, but also work really small. So this is how I do the storyboarding for like certain, it's very, very scribbly. Yeah. Sometimes I can't even recognize what I did myself, but these thumbnails are really, really small. And I think it's super helpful. It's very time effective. Like when you do very, very, so I have these like small notebooks where I do the grid and I just draw everything really, really small. This is like writing, basically like having a notebook and just writing down an idea. I would just sketch it out immediately as a little storyboard. And then later I can see, am I going to use it or not? Eventually there's both ways, whether you're working digitally or analog, like drawing with on paper with ink. You can either, I would blow them up. So I have these little sketches on this tiny notebook and I would copy them in a bigger format and then I could trace them on the light table. I just take the initial small thumbnail sketch and I just blow it up. Or if you do it digitally, like I'm showing you here, because work-life balance, actually I drew it on the iPad and on this program called Procreate. So I would just like take pictures of these thumbnails from these tiny notebooks and just blow them up on my iPad and then trace them digitally. So actually all the sketches for my final digitally inked pages are analog, are done on pencil. The other small bites thing I have to hurry up, I'm seeing, is the story development. So we have so you have like when you see, you have like a character, but it could also be like a place, but you have birth and death, right? So this is like the lifespan. And our story is just set in a small fraction of that. So we zoom into our story. And this is just a little quote that is very basic by Aristotle, is that a story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this is our story in this lifespan. So basically what you want to do is like divide it into 3 parts, beginning, middle, and end. And where you would have the beginning, maybe just as an example, I zoom into the beginning, and the beginning has like different scenes, small sections, you know? So for me, it's really helpful to just, that's why what I was saying, I don't work on the whole storyboard. So I just work scene for scene for scene. Each scene within this fraction of the fraction of the fraction should work like a little story in itself. Sorry, is someone saying something?
No, we're quietly listening to
Okay, sorry. And what helps me the most when developing those, like a story, is to have this minus and plus. It's like how each little scene should either start with a plus and end with a minus, or begin with a minus and end with a plus. That means it would start maybe with a negative. In this case, it would start negatively, the scene. Something bad happened to the character. And in the course of the scene, even just 4 pages, it turns, right? Like it goes from minus to plus. And this is a very helpful tool to create a dynamic from scene to scene to scene, which would later feed your whole story. I have a small example that I'm going to click through really quickly. So this is just an example. We have someone, she's going to a job interview, and she's hurrying, and she's saying like, oh, I'm having this job interview. Thankfully, my friend lent me this white suit. And then a car comes by. So it starts positively, full of expectations. Well, it starts negative in the sense because we have this thing that happens to her. It gets dirty, the suit. And then you have her idea how to solve the problem really quickly is get it all dirty. And then you would have like kind of a positive, like you have a negative beginning and then a positive ending. And maybe during the job interview, it starts positively because she goes there full of expectations, and then maybe she doesn't get the job. So, or something else happens during that meeting, which then goes from positive into negative again. So this is basically just like the dynamic that you can build from scene to scene to scene. Always think of that. It can be in the most minor ways, right? And this helps me a lot. So I always think of like each sequence, each little scene as its own mini story, like a micro story within the mini story within the bigger story. I'm going to click through we're almost actually done. I'm maybe going to go over to some general stuff that helps me also. This is just a very short. The other thing that I would say adds a lot to my work is like weaving in new ideas and experiences along the way. What I mean by that is that making a graphic novel or comic book takes a lot of time. I mean, most of you will probably know. And as I said, it's an off and on project. It's not that I work on it for like a year straight. It's like I work on it maybe through the course of 3 years, just off and on, right? And during a course of 3 years, a lot can happen. You can experience a lot of things. You learn new things. Maybe you change opinions about things. And I think it's important that it all reflects, I don't know, for me, it's important that this is a project that accompanies me throughout such a long time. And maybe something I thought of in the beginning, I would think differently about it a year later. And maybe it will reflect in my book. So I think it's really nice and great to take in a lot of the things you experience and just leave that space, like even though you have maybe a story that's already thought through, maybe leave a little bit of space to let new things in, that maybe even just something beautiful you saw and you just want to have it like a scenery and have it in your book, or an idea. It could be a bigger philosophical idea or something. And the other thing is not being afraid of mistakes. Also, because it takes a lot of time, maybe your drawing style will change a little bit, or some things will not be as perfect, and it will never be perfect. You can always, it's very important also to set a finishing point. So for me, I really had to learn it in the past years to let go and just not worry about it, because it's important that at some point it's just out. And this is what, yeah, in a way, really, I think I had trouble learning or struggled with, and I think I'm doing better at it now. But anyway, I think we've come to an end, and I can't believe it went on time. Yeah, I don't know if there is going to be a Q&A, or should I just come back to the screen? Maybe?
Yes, please. Please show us your face so the audience can see you.
Stop share.
Maybe it is the right time to ask the audience if you have any question for Aisha. Ima kdo mogoče kakšno vprašanje za Aisho? Okay. It seems that there aren't no questions from the audience, but I would have a question for you, since I know a lot of comic authors are used to draw bigger than what they print out. It seems that you are printing in ratio 1 towards 1. Is that true?
So this is the first time I'm drawing digitally. So I did a comic book completely digitally. So it is a totally different relationship to the format, because I'm stuck with the format of the iPad, right? So usually I would draw a little bit bigger, but not much. So my usual, I think Brigitte, I drew it on just like A5 format, and all my other books I think were a little bit smaller than A4, and then the printing is slightly smaller, but it's almost one to one. Yes, and in this case, yeah, it would be printed smaller than I'm originally doing it on the iPad. But you know, I'm like, I can make it smaller and bigger as I like. So it's like a totally different relationship. That's why I've been printing out so much on the my printer, because I'm drawing on the iPad, but I have no overview. So I'm actually, as soon as I have like a section drawn digitally, I print it out so I can actually look at it, you know, on paper. But yeah, the ratios are definitely off, and it's been a new challenge in this way, definitely.
Maybe some questions erupt from the audience? No? No, but we'll see you later today anyway, am I right? Or will you also be on the presentation of Colorama in the afternoon?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, I think because Johanna is speaking about her Colorama, so I'm generally involved with Clubhouse. So everything that is around Colorama, the Clubhouse project, I am always involved. And but yeah, she's doing that talk on her own. It will be about the whole printing studio, which I have no part in printing. I'm more of the person kind of like working with other artists and doing the drawings and stuff, but she is more the technical part, so yeah.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be present watching it.
Okay, great. Well, Aisha, since our time has run out, I would really like to thank you for this presentation. I think we enjoyed it very much here. Hopefully we see you in Slovenia in person in maybe some next years.
I hope so, yes. Thanks so much for having me.
So thank you very much. So you know there were some people here.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe it's like this fake clapping from the sitcoms, you know. Great, thank you.
So Aisha, thank you very much, and I would like to invite you all also to the exhibition in Dobra Vaga, where Colorama is having exhibition at the moment. Torej, v sklopu njene prezentacije bi vas želela povabiti tudi na razstavo v Dobri Vagi, kjer Colorama in umetnice, ki sodelujejo s Coloramo, pravkar razstavljajo in bojo razstavljale še vse tja do konca meseca. O založbi, o kateri je govorila, bomo pa več izvedeli tudi ob 5:30 popoldne, ko se nam bo založba prav tukaj tudi predstavila. Tako da najlepša hvala za obisk. Nadaljujemo 12:50 z debato o otroškem stripu. Vabljeni takrat nazaj v dvorano. Aisha, have a great day. Thank you very much.
Yes, enjoy the festival. Bye.